Welcome to 2020. This is January 1st, 2020. Sounds a little bit like Barbara Walters, and this is the Focus Group.
It's the savvy side of 9 to 5. Listen.
Bueller.
Laugh. And learn.
Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
This is the Focus Group with Tim Bennett
Staunch.
and John Nash.
Keep your clothes looking neat and clean.
We're all business, except when we're not.
Hello, welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. Be sure to join us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. East with our Saturday replay of the audio version on Saturday mornings. And if you are been paying attention the last 2 weeks, we've done an audio version of our show while our studio is on sabbatical or hiatus, but we'll be back in for live video feed in early January. January 8th, I believe, is our live show. So welcome to the new year, John.
Welcome to 2020. It does sound like a Barbara Walters special, right?
Wouldn't it be great? We should get an audio 2020. We should find that for the when we do the live show on January 8th to do the 2020. That might be kind of fun.
Hey, totally random, but right after Christmas, Bob and I were watching TV one night. I think it was ABC, and they started a broadcast. They were recreating 2 classic episodes from 2 old ABC shows from the 70s, All in the Family. And what was the one that J.J. Walker was in?
Good Times.
Good Times. They recreated the sets. They obviously had to recast because some of the cast members are not with us any longer or some are older. And they recreated these 2 shows. And one of them, the family, All in the Family one, Woody Harrelson plays Archie Bunker. Marissa Tomei was Edith. I forget who Meathead was. Kevin Bacon plays a guest that comes to dinner on Christmas Eve who lost his son in the Vietnam War. And Jesse Eisenberg plays this friend of Michael, the Meathead, who lives in Canada because he dodged the draft. And when Archie finds this out at the dinner table, all hell breaks loose. As usual, he has a whole thing about the country, the moment. And then he says to this friend, the Kevin Bacon, who lost his son, and again, they're recreating an All in Family episode. And the guy said, hey, both boys did what they thought they had to do. One went off to war, went to Canada. He goes, although I'm able to sit down and have dinner with the one that went to Canada, I'd rather be able to sit down with my son. And then Archie has to process what this all means because he thought his friend was going to be the patriot and say, oh my God, how dare you sit here, and then dinner finishes. But it reminded me that TV in the 70s, and the other show they recreated was it was a political show as well. Someone was running for office. He always counted on their votes. They wanted to give it to a younger guy who had better ideas, but the older guy ended up winning. And both stung in some ways. We couldn't believe some of the acting. For example, the guy that recreated Jimmy J.J. Walker in today's world in 2019, what's happening in all the hand gestures he did? He looked gay. I'm sorry to say it, but because I know that wasn't how the character was played. But the studio audience watching this went crazy whenever the guy that played J.J. Walker would come in and what's happening, or that was a different show. But it was really, we ended up watching the entire hour and a half thing and really just remembering like, wow, there was some stuff they did on TV with Norman Lear. They're actually Norman Lear shows. That was pretty amazing. You didn't get to see this, did you?
I didn't, but friends of mine that did see, and I do want to see if I can DVR it or something or watch it again. Everyone that I know that saw it said surprisingly that it held up well and that you could relate a lot of what's going on today with what was happening then. And that's what I thought was
that was that. In fact, the show ended, and I looked at Bob and I said, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
The other thing was that they, the language, you and I have talked about this many times on the focus group, the language that was used on All in the Family, the Jeffersons, Good Times, particularly All in the Family and the Jeffersons, particularly the use of the N-word, was very much not I still today, if I watch a rerun on one of the old channels like MeTV or something. I'm shocked that it gets through the censors, and I'm somewhat glad it hasn't been bleeped out, because that's what was going on and that's what was happening, and that's a historical point in time. But you could never get away with some of the language, and they were equal opportunity offenders. They called people derogatory sayings for lesbians and gays and everything else, and Hispanic people as well as African Americans. So they were equal opportunity offenders. But I heard it was it was every bit as good as what you said. Is that people that saw it were happy that they watched it. The one thing that I find sad, I guess, about our TV culture now is that there was a time where we all kind of had that water cooler conversation on Sundays, particularly around All in the Family, because that's what you watched, right? You saw saw 60 Minutes. You might have saw Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, maybe The Wonderful World of Disney. And then you saw All in the Family. On Thursdays, you saw The Waltons. On Tuesdays, you saw Happy Days. But there was this kind of collective, maybe it wasn't good because we all thought and saw the same thing, but I think it opened up discussions about issues that might have been difficult for some people to understand. And that's where I think the Vietnam War episode went with Archie. There were certainly two schools of thought on that, right?
Oh my God, yeah. And the Good Times episode, JJ's thing was dynamite, right?
Right.
The Good Times thing was notable for some really smart lines and scripting that the family had when they were talking about politics and how this assemblyman helped get them their apartment in the projects, but why isn't politics helping them move beyond the projects? So it's like you said a moment ago, it's very relevant in today. And that's what amazed me. A show from 1974 could be making points about our political system in 2019. And
they said Esther Roll, and I forgot the guy's name who played the father in the original series. It escapes me now. But they said both of them were really not happy with the Jimmy Walker character because they thought it took away it took away a lot of the cultural points or points they were trying to make by his foolishness. They thought he was a bit of a clown that took away from the seriousness of what they wanted to get across on an episode. I was reading a lot about that, that there was lots of tension on the set with the Jimmy Walker character, J.J. Walker.
I don't doubt it. It's almost like Dr. Smith taking over on Lost in Space.
Yeah, right. Here
I know
it comes.
it's not crazy Dr. Smith. I just thought I'd bring that up because it was a very interesting cultural thing that I would have totally missed had we just not been sitting around flipping through the channels.
No, I'm glad you saw it, but I'm sorry that I missed it. Hey, again, Happy New Year, Happy 2020. We're going to share with you some of our John and I might have a resolution or two toward the end, but before we do that, John had found this article from the New York Times, and it said 8 small ideas that have big impacts. And it goes through these different things that we could do to try to make 2020, or quite frankly, anytime you decide to pick these up, to make life simpler or to do a few things that could get you back on track if you're unmotivated. Or the first one I laughed about because this happens to you, I think, a bit, which was called Beat Those Sunday Scaries.
Yep.
And it talked about how a lot of people, and I remember my years in corporate America having this, the feeling that Sunday comes and it's Sunday dinner or you're getting ready to face Monday. And particularly if you're not necessarily happy in your career or job, how you somewhat dread, what's coming at you for the next 5 days for the week. And they coined this the Sunday Scaries. For you, I know sometimes you and I have talked about this recently, and I try to get you out of the mindset of being, I wouldn't say it's Sunday Scaries, but there's somewhat of an anxiety, I guess, about what's going to take place. And when I looked at it and it said it's whether you dislike your job or not, which is for a lot of people, I don't think you dislike your job, what you're doing. I think for you, there's a different level of
their thing says right here, that said, Sunday Scaries can just as easily happen to people who are happy with their jobs. And they say it's a type of low-level background anxiety that can hit anyone as Sunday afternoon sunlight recedes beneath the horizon. Mondays are not my favorite day of the week. They have been made better by something that this article tells you to do, which I think has helped me a great deal. And that's you just sit down quietly, jot out your goals for the week. And I'm talking about a piece of paper. Actually, to be frank with our listeners, I'm a big fan of handwriting stuff, but the problem that I have with taking notes or making lists is it's all on paper. And paper is great, but then you have to choose whether it's going to be a pad or a notebook. All these decisions. So I end up doing a pad of paper, but I end up with stacks of paper with things crossed out.
Here comes John again, overthinking it. Do I use a
Well,
book?
I
Do
finally
use a pad?
found
Do I use
one of
my
my-
iPad? Do I use a computer? Do I
Well, there you go. One of my old mentors, and when I took the animation program, recommended a note-taking application for the iPad Pro because I use the iPad Pro and the pencil. It's like handwriting on a piece of paper. It looks great. I can when I'm done writing it, I send it as a text, a picture of this to my computer. I have it up in the morning. I said, here's my goals. It's completely streamlined the process for me. And I know that sounds like a stupid thing, but now I will sit and carve out a half hour to quietly compose my thoughts about what do I want to accomplish specifically Monday, but how does that relate to the whole week? And then I'll block out things in my calendar that I know I have to do. Maybe I block out my exercise time. It doesn't always hold, but I block it out. And then I'm ready for the week. So I've gotten better, but you are right. You've heard me complain about Mondays like no one's business, right?
Yeah, but it's always, and it distresses me a bit because I think there's you and I could be in a worse situation, and I think in some ways we should look at things being more positive, and maybe that's what we look at for the new year. Maybe that's a resolution: be more positive.
You actually picked up on. I'm going to go into that. So
what was
the
number
next
two?
piece
What
in
was
this
the second
article
one?
was. Yeah, this was interesting to me, and it was called "Kick Dismissive Positivity to the Curb." So they, the way the woman Anna Goldfarb, who had this particular tip, categorized dismissive positivity was the following. She said, when a dear friend texted me she was nervous about an important meeting, I replied via text, "You've got this," along with a thumbs up emoji. However, when another close friend told me she had received some scary medical news, I mindlessly used the same approach. I said, "You've got this." But it didn't seem to make her feel better. In fact, my words made her withdraw. So she breaks this down and she calls that dismissive positivity. And I've been on the receiving end of it from people. And this goes into this whole thing about, do people really want to hear your problems? And if you do say you have a problem, or how are they reacting to it? And so she said, instead of saying you'll get over it to someone in distress, try the following. This is hard. You've done hard things before, and I believe in you. Subtle difference. You're not saying to someone, you'll get over it, or everything happens for a reason, or God don't give you what you can't handle. I call that dismissive bullshit positivity. Or think happy thoughts becomes, it's probably pretty hard to be positive right now. I'm putting out good energy into the world for you. I just think those are interesting ways of doing it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's the issue for me on all of this, the dismissive positivity. Somebody loses their job, right? We're all going through that with friends. And it's sometimes I don't know what to say or how to say it. And the one thing I learned, somebody told me, they said, when somebody says that, the best thing to do to a friend is to listen and do exactly what you said. Acknowledge that, yes, that is an issue, and maybe you should be worried, but it'll sort itself out, or something to that effect. They said the thing you can't do is to say, "Oh, you lost your job. You should hear what happened to me." And
there you go.
Then it becomes the, "Oh, that's too bad. I," and that even makes it worse because you didn't listen. And so it's really just acknowledging and listening to the person, and then reassuring them that, it might not make sense right now, but it'll correct itself or sort itself out. So I thought that was a good way of handling that. I often struggle. It's the same way when I've had friends that have lost a parent. I never know what to say.
Oh, well, I've thought about that a lot. And you literally just use language I have permanently erased from my vocabulary when it comes to death. Nobody loses somebody when they're dead. I lose my glasses or my reading glasses, or I'll lose a pen. You don't lose a human being. You know what happened. So I'm really cautious about saying anything except I'm even leery of saying I'm sorry for your loss. I'll just say, this is hard I can't even comprehend it. I still have a parent that's alive. It's I try to relate it to Yeah, but anyway, I'm making a mess of it, but I agree with you. It's very difficult. Those are hard ones.
Right. The number 3 was keep cool when you're waiting for a response. So it says you may have spent,
we're so like this. Yeah.
you may have spent a lot of time putting together an email or a draft of a presentation, or you send something to a client or a friend and you're looking for a response, and you're hoping that it's as important to them as you because you created it. And you're waiting and waiting and waiting and refreshing, and you haven't got a response. You and I, this happens to us a million times. But they said there's other ways to handle this. I did kind of laugh because the reality is you want an answer, right? But it's like, pick a substitute for replacement behavior. And, maybe call an old friend, text an old friend. They're liable to get back to you. That's even worse. You text an old friend, you hear nothing. Now the client's not got back to you. The friend's not got back to you.
I think my favorite of the 3, they had 3 coping techniques for after you do this whole, you write this email, you send it. So Tim named the first coping technique, pick a substitute. The second was my favorite, interrupt your worry spiral. So it's get away from the computer, disrupt what you're doing, watch a funny video. And the woman who wrote this, Lisa Petersons, she goes, I recommend searching on YouTube for bat eating grape. I don't know what bat eating grape is, but you better believe I'm going to search for it. She says, make plans to go to the movies, grab a drink with a pal. In my world, I would hit the send button, and if I had the ability to leave my desk, I could go to the gym or get on my bike, and it will clear my head. And then hang with select friends was her last one. I'm not even sure that's good advice, but...
Yeah, no, I just laughed at this because maybe it's, I don't know. I just laughed at it. It's well, I think we said all we said about it, but I thought her 3 things were kind of funny. Get out and do something else. Forget about it. No, I need an answer. I want to know.
Well, and it's interrupt your worry spiral. That's all it's about. Yeah.
What
this next one is it's okay to flake out sometimes gracefully. And this person says, I'm a huge flake. I make plans with friends and then cancel those plans a lot. As much as I think I would enjoy a night out of coffee or a date, as it gets closer, my cancel fingers get itchy. I have a big problem with this, and I've encountered this a couple times this year with people who have made definitive plans that have locked in schedules for reservations or a financial commitment, and then out of the blue, it's better for me if I don't do this, or I can't make it. And they do some of the techniques here that they recommend if you're going to flake out on somebody. Be honest, be emotionally available, tell someone why you're not doing it. But you know what? I'm going to sound like a scold. A commitment's a commitment. And
right.
I can't even I can't see getting worked up about meeting someone for coffee or tea. In fact, it's an enjoyable thing. There's less of an obligation to coffee and tea than there is to drinks or dinner, right?
Well, this is what you and I said that we missed about the old days, in that when you made a plan, and you and I talked about this, you and I would make a plan 2-3 months in advance to get together somewhere, and you might check in with a phone call, but you showed up, I showed up. And now, with the way technology is, it's easy to hide behind your phone and text, I don't feel well, I'm not coming, which is a lie. And they say, if you don't feel like doing it, say you don't feel like doing it. But I think what you're saying here, and what I agree with, is that where's your commitment to say you're going to do something, you do it. And if you didn't want to do it, don't say you were going to do it to begin with. And this goes back to someone you and I both loved, Tim Russert, many, many years ago. He said a lot of times he didn't want to do things, but he made the commitment, and he would go there and act as if it was the only place he ever wanted to be. Because he said, there's no use for you going there and being miserable either.
Correct. And I love that story. Because he would choose one event that he would make sure he was having the time of his life there.
Even if he wasn't. Even if he wasn't, right. The number 5 was be kind when you tell someone you don't love their idea. This is just basic 101, I think. It's essentially, whether it's workplace or it's friends, or maybe someone's buying a house, or whatever the issue is, it's just being a little more tactful. And I need to work on this. Sometimes I can be a bit abrupt and too direct by, it's a bad idea. And they say, if you think it's a bad idea, or if there's if you have a thought, maybe suggest it or bring it up in a nice way. It's just, to me, all of this, there was a lot written here, but to me it was about common courtesy.
Yeah. And something they call the compliment sandwich. If you're going to knock an idea, at least give someone two positives about it, and sandwiched in between the two positives is the critique. I learned that in animation, and that was a hard lesson I had to get every week was, this is good, this might need some, you might want to look at your thinking there.
Right.
But this is just learning how to be a more productive and positive feedback agent for people instead of just saying, the idea sucks, move on.
What was number
this
6?
One, don't mix business and friendship. The example they used here was someone says, I'm going to start a new business and I need to have a logo design for my company. And they say this to a friend who's a graphic designer who then says, I'll do it for you. No problem. Several weeks go by, the logo's not done. It's a favor. You can't pressure someone to do it because you're not paying them for it, et cetera, et cetera. And that, in fact, is the answer to this entire thing. You want to have a relationship. I believe you can do business with friends. I've done a lot of business with friends. It's worked out fantastic. But I've also learned along the way that if you don't frame it correctly, and that's usually, I have to have it done here. What are you going to charge? No, you got to charge full rate. This is a job. It makes a difference when you're paying, even if it's a friend.
Right, because you can then hold each other to timetables and accountability. So yeah, I think that's a simple one. This other one, number 7, let a friend's success motivate you. And this is essentially, we all have careers that have taken a different track, and they say, particularly if you have friends that do the same sort of job as you and maybe their career is moving faster than yours is, or you feel they're in a better place than you are, it doesn't do you any good to be jealous. You should maybe sit down and think about, okay, what can I change or what can I do differently that would make me feel just as good about my career success as my friends. And so I think the arch here was not to be jealous about a friend's success, because that's just going to send you down a rabbit hole and not going to do you any good.
Yeah, I will often say to friends who I'm like happy for, or something good happens, I'll start thinking the word jealousy, but I'll say I'm not jealous, because jealous is an ugly green monster with many eyes, but I am envious. That always gets someone to laugh, because envy is something we get. This last tip I'm going to tell you all to ignore, except I'm going to tell you to do it a different way. So one of these tips comes in, it says, clean your phone, it's filthy. You carry it around, you touch it all day, your hands touch things. I make a point of washing my hands the minute I walk in the apartment. I think it's done a world of good for me in terms of not catching colds. You can't avoid it. But I think because I read an article once, the cheapest, most effective way to reduce germs and transmitting diseases is soap and water. So wash your hands. But these devices, our iPads and our phones, get a lot of use, and we touch them all the time. In this piece, they recommend using some rubbing alcohol on a cloth and then wiping the phone. I'm going to tell you right now not to do that. Apple has been extremely specific about what not to put on their screens, and this is one of them. So I just take like a soft, like a t-shirt or something, and I'll put a little water on it and I'll wipe it off, or a microfiber cloth. The alcohol part, the rubbing alcohol, I think they're mentioning that because it sounds antiseptic on some levels, but the surfaces are not made to have repeated alcohol on them. So I would avoid that. But a microfiber towel and some water is fine with me. I mean, then wash your hands, right?
Yeah, it does I think that alcohol does put some sort of streak on the screen. I was surprised when I saw that as well. Unless they're talking about maybe your phone that's at your desk. If you have a landline, obviously you would use an alcohol wipe or something on that probably. But yeah, I thought so too about the cell phone thing. It didn't make sense.
You just reminded me of something. I used to sit next to a woman who was the secretary for the editor-in-chief of the magazine I used to do typesetting for. This goes way back to the mid-'80s. And she used to have a jar, like the plastic container of these like wipes, these like alcohol wipes or something. And she would every time she sat down at her desk, I think it was OCD, she'd take a wipe out and she'd wipe the keys of the phone and the handset. And I would laugh and I'd lean over out of my cubicle and I'd say, didn't you just do that? You know, like before you went to lunch. I don't know who's touched. She's laughing. She's like, I don't know who touched the phone in my absence, but I'm going to take care of it now.
Well, I think about how gross it used to be when we would go to the banks of payphones in a public area and somebody hang up and you would pick it right up and you feel the warmth of their air right on yours, right? I mean, think about
Or
how disgusting people are with their ears and their hair, and we just put the receiver right up to the face and mouth, right? Or the ear and mouth.
And we're all still here.
Yeah. Hey, so John, do you have any New Year's resolutions for 2020, or do you have anything that you've set on?
Yes, you hit it earlier on, and that is this. I think that I know for a fact, I've been thinking about this for some time, that I often say this as advice to people: plan for the worst, hope for the best. And it's an axiom that I think is okay. It certainly gets you through, or you think you get through by planning for the worst and hoping for the best. But oddly, a number of astrology sites, and I read this tarot card thing for my sun sign and my moon sign, whatever, and they all landed on the exact same thing. And one of them was really articulately written, and the guy said, we love to plan for all things. We think we can control reality. And the more you plan and the more you think you got everything, all the contingencies mapped out in your head, the more it's going to land where you want it to land. But the sad truth is reality doesn't work that way, and a plan is just a plan. And so I thought, okay, my resolution is going to turn my own thing around. I'm going to say, hope for the best and make a couple plans that in case something goes wrong. But I think putting hope for the best before plan for the worst is a mental attitude I'm trying to strike.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I've thought the same thing. If you had said to yourself when you got out of college, or when you went to college and what you were going to major in, or what you thought you were going to be doing now, you could have planned all the things you wanted to do and where you thought you would be at this point in your life. And the reality is none of it unfolded probably as you thought, or as you expected, or as you planned. And you have to be able to adjust and say, okay, somebody put a roadblock up here, or I had a stroke of luck here, and it's how you handle it and take advantage of it as to whether you're going to be happy or not. And that's I think for me, one of the things I plan to do is try to be more thankful and positive about what I am doing, because you don't have another choice. I don't think, a lot of times things unfold and you don't expect them to unfold with all the planning in the world. You and I have had that happen probably the last 10 years. You and I have had lots of plans and thoughts, and talk about roadblocks and twists and turns and curves, but we're still here. And that's what's important. For me, we talked about this on our show, the TFG Unbuttoned, which is our Tuesday podcast. We talked about the intermittent fasting, and maybe you and I both giving that a try. And I thought for myself, I'm going to try to do it for 2 months. I'm going to start, probably sometime in January, and getting away from the holidays and the temptations. But I'm going to try to do the intermittent fasting for 2 months and see how it goes. I figured I could do anything for 2 months.
You can. And I agree with your thinking. And this year, the years that I have set physical goals, and they could be something like I'm going, years ago, you remember I did a bike trip, a week-long cycling trip on the island of Mallorca off the coast of Spain. And it was no simple trip. You had to be, it was an advanced level riding thing, and meaning you had to be able to ride 50, 60, 70 miles a day, 4 days in a row. So once you put that marker on the map,
right,
and you work backwards, suddenly you have an entire physical plan laid out in front of you. You have to hit these milestones to make that trip fun, enjoyable, and something that I really get a great deal out of. The same is true of saying, I think I want to be 10 pounds lighter in 2.5 months or whatever. That sounds like a number that when you divide it over 8 weeks or 10 weeks, now I'm dealing with small numbers. And and I think that's the same with fasting, or the intermittent fasting, or with the weight goal things. I think once you put it out there, and it doesn't have to be nebulous, but I hate when people get really rigid, because that's when they fall off their resolutions. And
you're right. It's about small steps, because if you said I wanted to lose 5 pounds a month, that's very doable. And if you did that each month, you would reach your goal, rather than you saying, I got to lose 50 pounds.
Oh my God! If somebody says I have to lose 100 pounds, I have to do it.
Right.
That is a huge burden to carry. But 5 pounds a month,
is,
as you said, completely doable. In fact, if you just got rid of eating after 7 or 8 p.m., regardless of intermittent fasting, whatever, you just said, I'm not going to eat anymore after 7 or 8. I'm guaranteeing you're going to lose 3 or 4 pounds a month just from doing that.
So are you going to do a bike ride? Are you going to do a bike ride this year?
Yeah, I'm thinking of it. I was
Where do you
thinking
wanna
of
go?
going to, well, there's a Girona, Genoa, Italy, and then there's Girona, Spain. Girona is above Barcelona. It's north and east, so it's towards Italy. But they have a ride camp that they do all year there. And I thought, because I've done some of my most amazing cycling in Europe. The other thought I had was I would like to ride in the Dolomites of Italy, those like the Italian Alps. I know some people who did it. They had a great time. I prefer the way I do these ride camps, they call them. You set up shop at one place, and every day you ride in and ride out of that place. And you have your room, you're all unpacked. It seems like you're home almost. The other one where you do the Italian Alps, you have to go from place to place to place. You're in a new room every night. And I think after a few days, that would disrupt sleep. It might, I don't know, it's probably great, but I like the ride camp idea. So I'm puzzling about that Girona.
Yeah, I like that too. You can wash your underwear out and let it dry.
Well, yes.
And on that note.
All right, friends, we want to thank everybody for being with us to kick off 2020 here on our audio-only version of the Focus Group. We will be returning to our studio for video next week, which I think is going to be January
8th.
I don't even have the January 8th, correct. And we'll be back live on video 1 p.m. Facebook Live and YouTube. And by all means, continue to check out Unbuttoned, which is our Tuesday audio podcast. And everything's always available at focusgroupradio.com. And we're going to close Focus Group with what we normally say. Don't text and drive, arrive alive, and keep it safe in 2020. And we'll see you soon.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.